Hey there, Caleb Wojcik here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Atomos Shinobi, which is a 5.2-inch HDR monitor. It's beautiful, actually. The image that you get out of it is pretty good. It's about as good as the television that's upstairs in my living room. When I plug it into my computer and I do some color grading on it, or I plug it into a camera that I'm shooting in log mode, whether that's like a Sony mirrorless camera or a cinema camera, and put in the proper LUT, this thing's beautiful. So in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at what is included with this. It was just announced at the day that I'm filming this video, but I've had it for a few days to be able to test it and to get a feel for what it's like. It's basically like an Atomos Ninja 5 without the recorder in it. It's just a monitor, so there are no recording functions. There's an SD card slot, but that's more for loading LUTs and firmware and things. So that means it's super lightweight. It's only 200 grams or about 7 ounces, so just under half a pound. And that's because it's made of a polycarbonate material, so kind of a plastic feel to it, but heavy duty. It doesn't feel cheap, it just feels lightweight. Some of the tech specs on this, it is a 1920 by 1080 display, and like I said, 1000 nits of brightness. The pixel density is over 400 pixels per inch, so it is really, really nice looking, even nicer looking than an iPhone or something like that. The HDMI cable can accept a 4K signal, which is great, up to 30 frames per second, and it can accept a 1080p HD signal up to 60 frames per second. And I've noticed you will see it refreshing at 60 frames per second, which is cool. Really, one of the best features about this, though, is it is displaying HDR, so beyond the normal dynamic range of filming in Rec. 709. And it can do that up to 10 stops of dynamic range or more when you're filming in a log profile. So if you're on a Canon camera and you're filming in Canon log, or you're on Sony and you're using S-Log, or Panasonic and V-Log and all the different log profiles that are out there, this has a bunch of them built in so that when you're filming in those modes and recording in log, you can still visually see what it would look like beyond Rec. 709 a little bit to have that more dynamic range. So those profiles are built in, and when you're filming in log modes, you can get a preview of what that's actually going to look like. The battery life on these things is great when you're using one of these middle 750, 770, NP-F batteries from Sony. You can get 5 or 6 hours, which is pretty amazing. You can see here that this battery is dying, and this is a smaller one, but it's already been running for 30, 45 minutes, and you can see the battery in the camera is dying faster than this. So in general, you're not gonna be having to change these batteries as often as batteries on your camera. This screen is 1000 nits, which is just a measure of how bright something is, but that is bright enough for sure to see what it looks like outside. It's brighter than an iPhone or other cell phones that get super bright so you can use them in daylight. This thing will definitely do that. I actually have my camera dimmed pretty far so you can see this properly. When I was filming other monitor reviews, I would have to raise the ISO in my camera or shoot super shallow. But when I was filming this, I could go down to f6.3 or something like that because it was putting out so much light, so much brightness. It is an HDMI monitor and has an HDMI input on the side there. There's also a headphone jack on that side. And then over on this side is an SD card slot and a remote plug. On the top and bottom, all you have are those 1/4-20 screws to enable you to, screw it into a ball head or a magic arm or what have you. If you're going to use this for vlogging or just want to attach a microphone, you might want to get something that attaches into the top 1/4-20 so you can put your mic on there, or get something that splits a cold shoe into 2 kind of horizontally and have a mic on one and your monitor on the other. That would kind of be the ideal setup because there is not a cold shoe on top of this. But you could buy one that goes into 1/4-20. Kind of would look like this, but not quite this one, where you would screw this in and then your mic would attach there. If you don't have a camera monitor or you have one and you haven't been using it very much, here are a few ways that I typically use them, and I've been testing the Shinobi. Number one is just on top of a camera. So on top of a DSLR or mirrorless camera, right into the cold shoe using a simple ball mount like this. Another way would be using more of a tension arm or a bigger one like this and mount it to a point on your tripod so it's not actually touching your camera, and so when you touch the screen it doesn't move the camera around as much. Or if you're on a gimbal or something like that, attaching it with an arm or a clamp or what have you, you could use it that way too. But if you just put it on top of the camera like this thing is so lightweight that even vlogging, you know, on top of something like a Switch Pod, it is barely noticeable, honestly. If you use the smaller Sony batteries, you know, these ones, these 570s, you do get a decent amount of time, maybe an hour or so, from my experience using these on top. Obviously, the heavier the battery, the longer the battery life, but it's using these Sony NP-F batteries, the 570s, the 770s, and you can go bigger, but I like using just a bunch of these smaller ones to keep it super lightweight when I'm hand holding or if you're vlogging. Another way is if you're just wanting to have it as a monitor that's gonna be on your desk while you're editing, for example. Maybe you just want one really good high quality display, but it doesn't need to be huge. You know, you have the colors, the full spectrum, your HDR of what your image is gonna look good at on a tiny little 5-inch display. That's just enough for you to be able to get your exposure right, to make sure your blacks aren't overly crushed and what have you. And I've been using this Manfrotto Pixie, just screwed right into the bottom, open it up, put the monitor right here on top on my desk, hit the button, angle it to where I want it to go, have that sitting right there, plug that right into my 2013 Mac Pro in the HDMI port, and use that as my external display in Premiere Pro to get a better color grade. Because honestly, this monitor in 2019, just coming out, is much better than these Thunderbolt displays I've been using that are only 1440p and the colors have started to deteriorate. This thing in HDR is just much better for color grading. So in my last couple videos in this setup, where I do have the background completely black and I want to know exactly how far into the background the shadows get crushed and make sure that my highlights are good and all of that kind of thing, I've been using the Shinobi to figure that out. And because this thing is so small and portable, and grabbing a tiny little tripod like the Manfrotto Pixie, or even putting it on top of a Switch Pod if you had one of those, you could travel with this really well too. So if you're at a shoot or you're doing some editing live, you put this up next to you. And honestly, if you had a bigger Sony battery, maybe one of these 770s or 970s, you can kind of just tilt it back and prop it up that way and use that as an external monitor plugged into your laptop to have better color, better visuals of what it is you're actually filming. So we're gonna take a look at this. We're gonna check out the 1000 nit display, show you how bright it is, and I'm gonna walk through all the different things you can toggle on and off to make sure your shot's in focus and is exposed properly, as well as how to use LUTs when you're filming in log or what have you. So let's dive right in. The first thing you see is at the bottom, you have all of your different tools. So you have your waveform, your RGB parades, your vector scope, a zoomed in version of it, more of a histogram look, an RGB histogram, and then this view here, which kind of is a mix of all of those things put together, which is pretty nice. And you can increase the brightness there on one of the guides. Close this out of here. Then you have peaking, zebras. So if there are overexposed areas, you can see there are a few there from this shot that I took. False color, so you get an overall look at skin tones and things that are too bright or too dark to even be captured by your camera. And you can swipe through, and it isn't like a real-time swipe, but if you swipe, it jumps to the next section there. So you can see these are kind of a continuation. And then you can go black and white. You can zoom in 2x, and then you can move it around. So if you're checking focus, you have some of your aspect ratio guides as well. Cycle through a bunch of those. Some squeezing or de-squeezing for anamorphic, which is great. And then you can click the settings thing in the lower right. And in the lower right there, that's where you can get a little bit more specific about some of these settings. You know, what percentage do zebras show up in exposure? What color is the focus peaking gonna be? What LUT do I want to have from my 8 presets that you can load in? And you have a lot of different things you can go through in the menus here. So I think that this is a really simple interface where you can quickly tap through to get the things you need. I do like the small HD focus and how you can have different screens for kind of different stages of what you're trying to do. The responsiveness on this Atomos Shinobi is really fast though. So you can click through them really quickly to be like, oh, just gonna test my zebras there, test my focus, swipe back, and do what you need to do. So it is really handy to be able to click through them so fast. And I found that it's just so responsive to be able to use this touch screen very quickly. Let me actually jump to the top of the screen now to talk through some of those menu options, because there's a bunch of stuff within there too. So let me make this not as stretched anymore. And you can see at the top here, it's telling me that this is a UHD or 4K signal coming from the HDMI cable of this Sony RX10 Mark III, I think this is. And it's at 29.97 frames per second, and it's telling me that it's in Rec 709. And then when I click into here, it's showing even more detail, and you can choose how you want to output. So let's say you're shooting in log, in Canon log, or V-Log, or Sony log, whatever. You can choose which gamut and color settings and things you want in here, so that the display can show you more of what it will look like after you grade it and try to bring it into even HDR as well. So as you keep going, you have your audio settings, which is just how loud do you want your headphones. Then you have your battery. This is a better version of the little battery display in the upper right there, telling you how much voltage you're getting out of it, and then whether or not you want to lock or unlock or power down, and you power down on the back there. And then info, just telling you which firmware you're on version 10 right here, and the build info. You can always update this by using an SD card on the side. Next, on the top here, if you click monitor where it says native, that's where you're getting some of your options to turn something that's log into Rec 709 or use a LUT or what have you. So some of your settings are definitely up in there. You can also get to the battery menu again by clicking the upper right there. If you do want to clean up the screen a little bit and just focus on whatever you're trying to film, you can hit the monitor button in the lower left there. That doesn't take everything away. You can still see your battery level. You have a little menu button there, and you have your waveforms. But if you really want to clear it, zooming in or zooming out brings it completely clean, so you can focus on what it is you're trying to capture. So that's a quick overview of how to use the interface of the Atomos or Atomos software and the touchscreen for the Shinobi. But even if you're not filming videos and you're just doing stills or photography, using a bigger screen than what's on the back LCD, these are typically, 2.5, 3 inches. This is a good 5+ inches of screen, and the image is just so good. The quality is so good. It is a high dynamic range, 1080p display at 1000 nits. So even if you're outside taking photos or in like a studio environment, this will give you a pretty good representation of the image that you're actually capturing. And if you want this to be completely dialed into the proper color calibration, you can use an X-Rite i1 Display Pro, really long name, but that thing can let you basically dial in over time, especially as maybe the screen starts to, get used a lot. You'll want to continue to calibrate these if you're really concerned about the colors on this, especially if you're using this to do color grading. So definitely think about maybe getting this calibrated or buying that device or borrowing one from a friend to continually make sure the colors are accurate. A few things I do really like about this are obviously the display. It's beautiful, it's bright, it has that high dynamic range. So if you're using this not just on top of your camera, but at your computer to color grade, it's a great unit for that. I also really like that the HDMI and the headphone are on the side. When they're on the bottom of monitors, they're hard to get to, especially if there's more than one HDMI port and one's an in and one's an out and you don't necessarily know which is which. Having those on the side is great. I do wish kind of the SD card was on the bottom and there was a screw here on the side so you could maybe mount it differently, just different arms or mounting it from the side versus only the top and bottom, but that's okay with me. You can quickly get to the ports and the SD cards. So like I mentioned in this video, this just was announced. It's February 15th, 2019. I've had it for a few days to be able to test it out a little bit. Maybe I'll have more feelings about it in the future, but this is kind of a first look preview, review of it. Been super happy with it. The image quality is great. It is super lightweight, and being able to color grade in HDR or actually see your waveforms or do all of the things super quick. The touchscreen is very, very responsive. Atomos' OS has always been great. And just the ability to bring in different LUTs and different log profiles based on the cameras you already own and are using to film is really great. So definitely check this out. It's in that mid-tier price range for monitors. It's launching at $399 US and €399 as well. So that price might come down years in the future if you're watching this later, but right now I think this is a pretty good bargain for what you're getting. If you're looking for other camera monitors, here's a couple other videos where I've reviewed other ones, cheaper ones, different ones, etc. And if you're wondering what this is here, this is a SwitchPod. This is a tripod that I invented with Pat Flynn for vlogging. So check that out at switchpod.co, or I'll link to it up on the screen here as well. I've been Caleb Wojcik. Thanks so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in another one. Cheers.